I write my notes that I have up here every week, and I didn't, I have a question that I pose up front in the intro to kind of help me lead the intro in. And when I looked at over this morning, I didn't realize what I had put in the first four words. It sounds like a movie trailer. In a world where, I just thought that was kind of funny. I'm like, really? But in a world where poverty and poverty reigns and disaster abounds, how in the world are we supposed to avoid it? Because poverty is rampant in our world. I mean, in our country, we're kind of blessed. We're not kind of blessed. We're very blessed. Even those who are in poverty among us are still among some of the richest in the world. But you think about third world countries and Central America and Africa. Carol just went to Guatemala. I mean, these people are dirt poor. Poverty reigns in some of these places, and disaster abounds. You get a hurricane through one of these places, and it tears it all apart. But in this type of world where poverty reigns, disaster is knocking at our door, how are we supposed to avoid it? Well, today we're going to be in Proverbs 6, and I'm splitting Proverbs 6 in half because Proverbs 7 goes with the second half of Proverbs 6. So I'm going to tackle the last half of Proverbs 6 and the entire chapter of chapter 7 tomorrow. We in a tent revival on next Sunday. But this week we're going to focus on verses 1 to 19. And this first section, there's two main sections. And this first section is things that lead to poverty. And the first subheading here, verses 1 through 5, are foolish financial entanglements is what I've kind of come up with here between the commentaries and everything. Starting in verse 1, it says, "My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor or entered into an agreement with a stranger, you have been trapped by the words of your lips and snared by the words of your mouth." First verse there is, it says that if you put up security for your neighbor, co-signing a loan, is essentially what this is. If you guarantee, a security for a loan, which sometimes we do this. Verse 2 says the consequences of this, by doing this, we've literally been trapped by the words of our lips and ensnared by the words of our mouth. Avoiding poverty is kind of where it starts. It starts by avoiding foolish financial entanglements. In our world, we many times, people co-sign for a loan and it's really high interest because the banks have a tendency to just kind of, they really lay it on thick to people who to people who don't have good credit ratings. We're talking 19, 20, 21% interest. They just really take advantage of the situation. And if you co-sign a loan, again, verse 2 says you've been trapped by your own doing. Verses 3 to 5 say, "Do this then, my son, and free yourself, for you have put yourself in your neighbor's power. Go, humble yourself, and plead with your neighbor. Don't give sleep to your eyes or slumber to your eyelids. Escape like a gazelle from a hunter, like a bird from a fowler's trap." Now, when you sign loan papers for a cosign, you're kind of in it. There's really no way to get out of it until the debt is actually paid. But 3 to 5, we can look in this and say, we need to be careful of this type of situation, because we've literally put ourselves not only in our neighbor's power, but we've put ourselves at the mercy of a financial institution. You want to avoid poverty, we've got to avoid foolish financial entanglements. That's what the first sermon series of the year was all about. It's about stewardship. We're talking about how to manage finances appropriately. Okay? Now, there were laws in the Old Testament. Exodus 22:25 says, if you lend money to my people, to the poor person among you, you must not be like a moneylender to him. You must not charge him interest. Again, in Leviticus, we've got a similar type of passage here. Leviticus 25:35-37 says, if your brother becomes destitute and cannot sustain himself among you, you are to support him as a foreigner or a temporary resident so that he can continue to live among you. Do not profit or take interest from him, but fear your God and let your brother live among you. You are not to lend him your silver with interest or sell him your food for profit. From looking at these laws of the Old Testament, from looking at this first 5 verses here in chapter 6 of Proverbs, we can discern from this, yes, we are supposed to help people in need. But necessarily is the best thing for them actually co-signing a very high interest loan, which perhaps could bring us crashing down in the process too. You know what I'm saying? What's the best way to actually help this person? Luke 6:34-36 reads like this, and if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to be repaid in full. But love your enemies, do what is good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Then your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is gracious to the ungrateful and evil. Be merciful, just as your Father is also merciful. You see, there's nothing wrong with, banks. I am of the personal mindset now, of course, we need to avoid debt at all costs. Now, sometimes you can't. You can't help it because you're behind the 8 ball and there's not much that you can do otherwise. But debt, if incurred, should be paid off as soon as possible. With a high interest loan, you get these credit cards that are at 22, 23%. Most of the payment's going towards the interest instead of the whole towards the whole balance. So we need to make sure that we are helping people in the best way possible. You see, helping somebody is great, but like Luke says there, it's the words of Jesus is who is talking, and Jesus says that we should, when we give to people, we should give without expectation of return, and that what is the best way to help this person? Is it co-signing a high interest loan for somebody? The whole point of the matter of these first 5 verses, that if you take nothing else away from this, I want you to take this. Finances are a spiritual matter, whether you think they are or not. Because many times, did you know Christ, I believe if he doesn't talk about money the most, it's one of the highest things that he talks about. Our finances are very, very important, and it is a spiritual matter to be considered. So, therefore, making unsound financial decisions can cause poverty. Now, there's nothing wrong with saving money for the future. But again, if it's sitting around doing nothing, what is it gaining? Is it working like the parable of the talents? The 2 went out and made the money work for them, and the 3rd buried it in the ground. And when the master came back, he's like, you evil, wicked slave, what have you done with my money? You at least give it to the institution, so I would have gotten interest upon return. But make it work for the kingdom. If you're going to help somebody, let's help them in the right way. Now, the second section here is laziness. In verse 6-8, it says, "Go to the ant, you slacker. Observe its ways and become wise. Without leader, administrator, or ruler, it prepares its provisions in summer, and it gathers food during the harvest." It tickled me this week that the Bible uses the word slacker. That's a term I used in high school and never thought I'd come across it in the Bible. But that term slacker, in other versions, it's translated sluggard. You think of a snail, a slug. They just ooze around. I've got slugs in my backyard. They move so slow. It's like, whoa, wait, did he move a millimeter? But a slacker is somebody, and I wanted to look this up because I'm like, okay, so what are they getting at? Slacker. What are we talking about here? It's somebody who is habitually lazy or inactive. That is what a slacker or a sluggard is. Okay, so all right, now that we've got this in the forefront of our mind, we're habitually lazy and inactive. Okay, we get it. Solomon is admonishing these slackers to pay attention to the ant, who yet has no leader, but it has the foresight to prepare in summer for the winter months. That's called intrinsic motivation. Thank you, Dawn. I'm like, there was some kind of word that went along with it, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what it is. But it's called intrinsic motivation, meaning they don't need somebody to tell them to prepare for winter. They already automatically do, because they know winter's coming. That's why an ant works the whole summer, is to store food for the colony, not just for the summer, but for the winter months that they know are coming. Okay? So Solomon is admonishing these people to go to the ant and observe its ways, and without a leader, administrator, or ruler, it prepares its provisions in the summer, and it gathers its food during harvest. Okay? You see, it's, a slacker is more than just somebody who is habitually lazy or inactive. We're talking about people who only move when people tell them to. We're talking about people who are wise. They see the need coming and they're motivated to action well before a leader has to get up and say anything. They see the need coming, and they automatically, that's the whole point of what the ant does. The ant sees the need, and it doesn't need somebody to tell it what to do, because it knows what it has to do. It knows what's coming next. For a couple of examples, now the first one, you're probably going to, I agree with me wholeheartedly. The first example I'm going to give you is a person on welfare. There are people who make a living off of welfare. I mean, they literally refuse to get a job. They refuse to do anything. They have more and more children. There are people out there that do this. There is nothing wrong with using the system that is there. It's what Social Security, welfare, Medicare, it's what all these programs are for. It's designed to help. But somebody who is a slacker, a sluggard, who has no intention of going out and getting a job, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about these type of people. The other example that I want to give you is, something that we can identify more with ourselves is priorities. Okay? Sometimes our priorities get really out of whack. Now, remind you, I'll go through this again. Priorities: God, self, a couple, children, and ministry. First of all, God's got to be first. Okay? God has to be first. Second of all, your spiritual walk with God needs to be second. Because if you're not spiritually fed, then you can't help your spouse. If you are married, your cup's got to be full. Your cup has got to be full if you want to help minister to your coupleship, your marriage. And the couple is before the children, because if you get the children before the couple, then you're going to have problems when the kids leave the nest, right? You got to have a solid marriage so that the kids know what a true marriage is all about. Okay. After the children comes ministry. Now, this is not to say that ministry takes a back burner, but to say that ministry, I'll use career ministers for an example. A lot of times, career ministers put ministry second on the list, or even sometimes ahead of God. The ministry is much more important than themselves, their family, their marriage, their kids. Okay? Not to say that the first thing that needs to be cut is the ministry, but the priorities have to be straight. Okay? For example, a family who works constantly and the kids are in baseball, softball, If you do ministry stuff, do a ministry that the family can do together. Go to a food pantry and help with a distribution day. Go to a soup kitchen, a great place to go. Volunteer to ring the bells for the Salvation Army in the Christmas time. That's something you can do together as a family. Do these ministries together as a family so that it shows the family how not to become a slacker. Because when we put our priorities and get them all out of whack, that's where problems happen. Priorities get out of whack and families suffer because of this. And I'll tell you right now, I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of getting my priorities all mixed up. And if you want to know the truth, that's the truth of why we're resigning, is because our priorities are not straight. Our family needs help. Our family needs to get ourselves straight before we can be of help to anybody else. We've got to have our priorities straight. As a minister, it's too easy to get the ministry ahead of everything else. Okay? So I want to kind of help you guys, warn you of the same thing, that you don't get your priorities all out of whack. Okay? Make sure that the priorities are there. Verses 9 to 11, it says, "How long will you stay in bed, you slacker? When will you get up from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and your poverty will come like a robber, your need like a bandit." You see, Solomon urges the slacker to get up, get out of bed, and get to work. Because while the slacker is busy resting and relaxing and enjoying the good life, so to speak, poverty is knocking at the door, and before too long, it's going to be too late to rectify the situation. MC Hammer, from back in the late 80s and early 90s, made millions of dollars. And while he relaxed, and I know Jennifer's back there laughing at me because I'm using MC Hammer, but he's a great example, isn't he? He went broke. While he's sitting back relaxing and wasting and spending his money, he's filed bankruptcy. So again, financial entanglements, avoid these financial entanglements, avoid this laziness. Continue to work, because before you know it, it'll be too late to rectify the situation. That is why we save up for retirement. That's why we pay into Social Security. That's why we have the 401k. It is not wrong to save. You need to save. Really, seriously. Okay? It's a good thing. But don't become lazy in it. The second section is avoiding disaster and God's hatred. The first subheading here is maliciousness leads to disaster. Verse 12. "A worthless person, a wicked man who goes around speaking dishonestly, who winks his eyes, signals with his feet, and gestures with his finger, who plots evil with perversity in his heart. He stirs up trouble constantly. Therefore, calamity will strike him suddenly. He will be shattered instantly beyond recovery." You see, again, I wanted to go to these words. I'm a definition nut. I want to know exactly what the Hebrew is saying. I want to know what the original language is. I want to know what the definitions are. Worthless is kind of it's a good for nothing. It's a wicked kind of thing. Okay, wicked it refers to deceit and evil and disaster. And verse 12 says that this wickedness, this deceit, this evil, this good for nothing is revealed by their dishonesty. He says, a worthless person, a wicked man who goes around speaking dishonestly. A dishonest person, a wicked person is going to be revealed by their dishonesty. Okay? It is going to be revealed of them. Because they do so with, winking of it says, who winks his eyes, signals with his feet, gestures with his fingers, who plots evil with perversity in his heart. You see, they live for evil. I think of this, that kind of, it's painting a picture of a con artist. Okay, is kind of what it's doing. Because con artists, they have these signals among themselves that they wink and they tap their toe, and they do various kind of things to signal to their counterparts where the story is going. Okay, they've prepared for all kinds of contingencies, and that's kind of who this is kind of painting a picture of. Okay. You see, hateful people are always plotting evil. They're always causing dissension and drawing people into disunity and discord. It's the 3Ds. It's dissension, disunity, and discord. If that is what a person, and I mean in their entire life, is full of, then probably they've got an issue with wickedness and deceit and evil. They may claim Christianity, but inside they're in inner turmoil. They need help. They need prayer. They need help. Okay. Verse 15, it says, therefore calamity will strike him suddenly, and he will be shattered instantly beyond recovery because of their hatred, because of their deceptiveness, because disaster strikes, it will strike suddenly and instantly among them. They won't be able to see it. I think of the con artist, where the con artist comes and they're caught up in this plot, but they don't know that the guy who they're trying to con is an undercover cop, an undercover cop. And lo and behold, they end up getting caught, and it comes upon them swiftly, and the police rush in, and they're arrested, and before you know it, they're in jail and attending a Kairos prison ministry weekend. But seriously, these are the kind of things. Disaster sweeps in heartily and heavily, and everything in our life. If there's one thing I learned from the Kairos, is that everything works together for the good of those who love God, because these people need help. It is God's way of reaching them, and probably the only way some people are going to get reached is by having something that drastic hit them. I call it the spiritual 2x4, hitting right upside the head, because sometimes you need it. It's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people I know. And the problem is that when that spiritual 2x4 comes, you have to live with the consequences of your own actions, because that's what hurts me the most. It's not that people hurt me, but they don't understand that they're hurting themselves. They don't understand that it's the chains of bondage, like we talked about last week, that keep them bound up, that keep them from living a free lifestyle in Christ. That's what kills me the most. Second section here is the things that God hates and detests. Verses 16 to 19, it says, 6 things the Lord hates. In fact, 7 are detestable to him. Arrogant eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that plots wicked schemes, feet eager to run to evil, a lying witness who gives false testimony, and one who stirs up trouble among brothers. Now, I really had to dig into this because that verse 16 here, at first it was confusing, because it says 6 things the Lord hates. In fact, 7 are detestable. I'm like, well, okay, if it's 7, then why not just say 7? Well, the idea here is this is used in a couple different places. In my commentary, thank God that it pointed this out when in verse 16. But it's used in Job, and it's used in a couple different places. And what he's doing is Solomon's making a list of 6 things that the Lord hates, but the 7th is kind of the tie together. It's a culmination of the 6 previous things that the Lord hates. Okay, so number 1 is arrogant eyes. Arrogant eyes. I'm like, what? As my dad would say, they're so stuck up, their nose is stuck so far up in the air that they can't see the light of day. Okay, arrogant eyes. I get that. Being conceited and really kind of self-centered. Arrogant eyes. A lying tongue. Well, that's pretty much self-explanatory. That's number 2. Number 3, hands that shed innocent blood. Again, murder, things like that. Number 4, a heart that plots wicked schemes. Feet eager to run to evil. At the first opportunity, again, your feet run to evil instead of going to God. Okay? Number 6, a lying witness who gives false testimony. All coming together to result in one who stirs up trouble among brothers. Somebody who is arrogant, somebody who is stuck up, somebody who lies, somebody that sheds innocent blood, somebody that plots wicked schemes, somebody who turns to evil at the first opportunity, somebody who will go to a court of law and bear false witness. Notice that lying is listed there twice. That's not an accident. It's important. Don't lie. But number 7, it all results, it's a person who stirs up trouble among the brothers. This is, my friends, this shouldn't be so. Solomon uses, eyes, tongue, hands, heart, feet. They use every part of their body for evil. They're consumed by it. Remember last week? They're consumed by the evil. And that is the truly sad part, is they're so consumed by the evil that they can't see. Proverbs warns us to make sound financial decisions. It warns us to work for our keep. It warns us to avoid God's hatred by avoiding the things that God hates, avoiding the maliciousness, the hatred that lives inside. Avoid it at all costs, because Jesus Christ is the only thing that our focus should be on. Jesus Christ is the one thing we should be focusing on. And if we truly focus on him, Jesus will not lead you astray. Guaranteed. That is not an if, that is a guaranteed. He will not lead you astray. Christ blesses. Oh my gosh, Gary Wilkerson's devotion on Monday was incredible. And he rounded out the devotion with this quote. He says, "You are blessed to be a blessing." God doesn't bless and expect you to keep it to yourself. Whether it's money, whether it's the gift of preaching, whether it's the gift of teaching, whether it is the gift of shepherding, whether it is the gift of gab, use it to God's advantage. You are blessed for a reason. Use it for his glory, because gifts can be taken back, can be taken away if they are not used properly. If Christ blesses us, use it to be a blessing to other people. If you're following Christ, you're going to want to avoid hatred and laziness and the things that God hates. You're going to want to avoid all of these things. You're going to want to avoid financial ruin. You're going to want to avoid all of this, because you're going to be willing to be consumed with loving God and loving others that he tells us that we should be. He says that this sums up the law and the prophets. It's what it is. If you're pursuing Christ, you are pursuing Jesus Christ. You're pursuing this righteous lifestyle. You're going to hate the things that he hates, and you're going to love the things that he loves. As we come to invitation time, I focus on Christ. Yeah, I gave my letter of resignation. Yes, I'm resigning. But that's because I believe it's not only best for this church, but I also believe it's the best thing for my family. It really is. I am adamant that the person that needs to be here is a healer. This church needs healing. And that's my weakness. I can't. For the life of me, I can't. My family needs to be healed from all of this. Focus on Christ. Be willing to do anything and everything it takes in order to do that. And that means anything and everything. Follow him. This is something that he's been calling to me for a long time, and I've just ignored it. I've ignored it, and I've ignored it, and I've ignored it. And I go back and I wonder if I should have even taken this job in the first place, because I should have taken a rest after the last one. I should have stayed right where I was at and taken that rest then. But again, he's got a plan and purpose. He has me here to help this church, to bring the things that are in the dark to light, so that way this church can heal. Because that's what I do. I bring things to light. I've come to peace with that. That's okay. I bring things to light. That was my mission in the first 3 churches of my life. But more than anything, with my own family, he's shown me that you sometimes got to learn the hard way. Sometimes you just got to learn the hard way. And again, that's okay too. Sometimes we need that spiritual feedback to come over us and hit us upside the head. Don't be sad. It's okay. This isn't your life. This is it. But in the remaining time that I've got here, let's get that healing ball started. I don't know where it starts. I honestly don't. But I know it's got to start somewhere. And if I can help that ball get rolling before I leave and help the elders and the leadership of the church and everybody involved, if I can help get that started, then let's do that. You know? One of the things that I was shown is that one of the qualifications for leadership in the New Testament is that it's be blameless. And I realized that this week, that if I stay blameless, I'm not going to be seen as blameless. I'm going to be seen as though I'm running people out of the church, and that just can't be. I can't do that. I can't. People aren't going to come if they see that the leader of the church, whether it's right or wrong or indifferent, doesn't make a difference. If the leader of the church is seen as being not blameless, people aren't going to come. Gary Baker told me a story this week, and here's the story. Gary Baker told a story of a guy. This was an actual ministry that he had, and he said that he had done a funeral for a lady who lived 2 doors down from the church. Literally, like for 40 years, lived 2 doors down from the church. And he did her funeral, and the daughter started coming to the church. She came one Sunday, the very next Sunday after they buried her mom. This daughter came to church, and Gary was preaching on salvation. And the daughter never came back. Gary went to her and he said, "Why haven't you come back? And we would love to have you." And he goes, "My mother lived 2 doors down from this church and never heard about Jesus Christ. Never. I cannot go to a church that can't go 2 doors down, knock on the door, and share Jesus Christ." True story. True story. The point being, rely on Jesus. Because we can't spread the gospel of Jesus Christ until we are in a right relationship with Christ. We've got to be right before we can actually share. It's why this church is kind of, I've heard many people describe it as a wheel that stopped. Yeah, kind of, sort of. That's not my analogy, that's somebody else's. I couldn't even tell you who told me that. But it's like it's a wheel that has stalled, it's a wheel that has stopped. Yeah, it's because there's things that need to, and I realize this now, that things need to be healed. Do it. Do it. And I'll help in any way I can. It may be my biggest weakness, but that's one of the places that I intend is not going to be weakness for long. Stand with me. Sing with me. Let's sing a hymn of invitation. Come forward if you need prayer. Come forward if you need to give your life to Jesus for the first time. Maybe you realize it today like you haven't before. We're going to sing "Living for Jesus." How appropriate.